What if playing it safe is actually the riskiest move of all? This audiobook will teach you how to think boldly, act decisively, and turn calculated risks into your greatest advantage, no matter where you start. Are you ready to unlock the mind of a true risk-taker? Chapter 1. Playing it safe is the real danger. Most people believe that playing it safe is the smart choice. They think that, by avoiding risk, they're protecting themselves from failure, embarrassment, and loss. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Playing it safe is actually the most dangerous path you can take. It's a slow poison that kills dreams, suffocates potential, and guarantees a life of mediocrity and regret. When you choose safety over growth, you're not avoiding risk. You're simply choosing a different kind of risk. You're risking stagnation instead of failure. You're risking regret instead of temporary setbacks. You're risking the gradual erosion of your potential instead of the possibility of temporary embarrassment. And perhaps most tragically, you're risking never discovering what you're truly capable of achieving. The illusion of safety is seductive because it feels comfortable in the moment. Your current job might not excite you, but it pays the bills. Your current relationship might not fulfill you, but it's familiar. Your current lifestyle might not inspire you, but it's predictable. This false sense of security creates a prison of comfort that becomes increasingly difficult to escape as time passes. But consider what safety really costs you. Every day, you stay in a job that doesn't challenge you. You're not just maintaining the status quo, you're actually moving backward. While you're standing still, the world around you is evolving. Technology advances, industries shift, and new opportunities emerge. Your skills atrophy, your network stagnates, and your market value diminishes. What felt safe yesterday becomes obsolete today. The myth of job security exemplifies this perfectly. Millions of people cling to corporate positions, believing that loyalty and steady performance will guarantee their future. Yet layoffs happen regardless of tenure. Companies merge, downsize, or become irrelevant. The safe employees, who never developed entrepreneurial skills, never built diverse income streams, and never cultivated transferable expertise, find themselves most vulnerable when change inevitably arrives. Playing it safe also robs you of compound growth. When you take calculated risks early in your career, the potential returns have decades to multiply. A bold career move at 25 might seem scary, but it could lead to exponential growth over the next 40 years. The same move at 45 has much less time to compound. Risk-taking has a time value that makes early action disproportionately powerful, beyond professional consequences. Safety-seeking behavior creates psychological damage. When you consistently avoid challenges, you train your brain to believe you're not capable of handling difficulty. Your confidence atrophies like an unused muscle. You begin to see yourself as fragile, dependent, and limited. This self-image becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that constrains your future choices even further. The regret of inaction is also uniquely painful because it's permanent. When you fail, after taking a risk, you can always try again with lessons learned. But when you fail to take risks, the opportunity often passes forever. You can't reclaim the business idea someone else executed, the person you never asked out, or the adventure you never took. These missed opportunities compound into a deep sense of what could have been. Contrast this with the mindset of natural risk-takers. They understand that failure is temporary, but growth is permanent. Every risk they take, whether it succeeds or fails, provides valuable data dates themselves and the world. They build resilience, adaptability, and confidence with each attempt. Even their failures contribute to their eventual success, because they're constantly learning and iterating. The safe path also tends to be crowded. When everyone chooses conventional routes, competition becomes fierce for mediocre rewards. The corporate ladder has thousands of people fighting for each rung. Traditional career paths become saturated with qualified candidates competing for limited positions. Meanwhile, the unconventional paths, the ones that require more risk, often have less competition precisely because most people avoid them. Consider the entrepreneurs who started businesses during economic recessions. While others sought safety in traditional employment, these risk-takers saw opportunity in chaos. They launched companies when rent was cheap, talent was available, competition was focused on survival, rather than innovation. Many of today's most successful companies were born during economic downturns, because their founders understood that apparent danger often masks hidden opportunity. The pace of change in our modern world makes safety seeking even more perilous. Industries that seemed stable for decades can be disrupted in months. Skills that took years to develop can become obsolete through automation or technological advancement. In this environment, the ability to adapt quickly, to take risks and pivot when necessary becomes essential for survival, not just success. Risk takers also tend to live more fulfilling lives because they align their actions with their values rather than their fears. When you make decisions based on what excites and challenges you rather than what feels safe, you're more likely to find work that energizes you, relationships that inspire you, and experiences that expand you. This alignment creates a sense of authenticity and purpose that safe choices rarely provide. The compound effect of small risks is particularly powerful. You don't need to make dramatic, life-altering decisions to harness the power of risk-taking. Speaking up in meetings, volunteering for challenging projects, or starting conversations with interesting strangers are all small risks that can lead to significant opportunities. These micro-risks build your risk-taking muscles while keeping the potential downside manageable. Understanding that safety is an illusion helps reframe your relationship with uncertainty. Instead of seeing the unknown as threatening, you can view it as the natural state of a dynamic world. Instead of trying to eliminate uncertainty, you can learn to navigate it skillfully. This shift in perspective transforms risk from an enemy to be avoided into a tool to be mastered. The path of safety ultimately leads to the highest stakes gamble of all, betting your entire life on the assumption that the status quo will persist. This is the riskiest bet possible, because it's the one most likely to fail. Change is the only constant, and those who embrace it position themselves to thrive regardless of what the future brings. The real danger isn't in taking risks, it's in avoiding them. Every day you choose safety over growth. You're not protecting your future, you're limiting it. The price of playing it safe isn't just missed opportunities, it's a gradually diminishing life that falls short of your potential. The question isn't whether you can afford to take risks, it's whether you can afford not to. Chapter 2: The Psychology of Risk. How your brain tries to protect you and hold you back. Your brain is an ancient survival machine operating in a modern world, and this mismatch creates one of the greatest obstacles to taking intelligent risks. Understanding the psychological mechanisms that drive risk aversion is crucial, because you can't overcome what you don't understand. Your brain's risk detection systems evolved over millions of years to keep your ancestors alive in a world where taking the wrong risk often meant death. Today, these same systems frequently prevent you from taking the very risks that could transform your life. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, treats uncertainty as danger. When you consider starting a business, asking for a promotion, or moving to a new city, this primitive structure floods your system with stress hormones. Your heart races, your palms sweat, and your mind generates worst-case scenarios. This physiological response served our ancestors well when facing predators, but it's poorly calibrated for modern risks where the downside is temporary discomfort rather than death. This threat detection system operates on what psychologists call the better safe than sorry principle. It would rather generate 1,000 false alarms than miss one real danger. In prehistoric times, the cost of being overly cautious was minimal. Maybe you missed a meal or a mating opportunity, but the cost of being insufficiently cautious could be fatal. This asymmetric payoff structure hardwired extreme caution into our neural architecture. The problem is that modern opportunities often require the opposite approach. The cost of excessive caution in today's world can be enormous missed opportunities, while the cost of intelligent risk-taking is usually manageable setbacks. Your brain's risk assessment software is running on obsolete code that prioritizes survival over success. Cognitive biases compound this problem by systematically distorting your perception of risk. Loss aversion makes potential losses loom twice as large as equivalent gains. This means that even when a risk has positive expected value, your brain experiences it as a net negative. The possibility of losing $10,000 feels much more painful than the possibility of gaining $10,000 feels pleasurable, even though they're mathematically equivalent. The availability heuristic further skews your risk perception by making easily recalled examples seem more probable than they actually are. Dramatic failures receive more media coverage than quiet successes, so your brain overestimates the likelihood of catastrophic outcomes. You can easily recall stories of failed startups but struggle to remember the many successful businesses that never made headlines. This creates a mental database bias toward negative outcomes. The confirmation bias ensures that once you've decided something is risky, you unconsciously seek information that confirms this belief while ignoring contradictory evidence. If you believe starting a business is dangerous, you'll notice every story about business failures while overlooking statistics about successful entrepreneurs. Your brain becomes a prosecutor arguing against your own potential rather than an objective judge weighing evidence. The status quo bias adds another layer of resistance by making current circumstances feel more comfortable than equivalent alternatives. Even if your current situation is objectively suboptimal, familiarity makes it feel safer than change. This bias grows stronger over time as you invest more of your identity in maintaining consistency with past decisions. The longer you stay in a situation, the harder it becomes to imagine alternatives. Social proof compounds these individual biases by making the risk-averse behavior of others seem like wisdom, rather than fear. When everyone around you is playing it safe, taking risks feels not just scary but socially deviant. Your brain's need for tribal acceptance adds social risk to every individual risk, creating a double barrier to bold action. The planning fallacy further distorts risk perception by making you overconfident about your ability to predict and control outcomes. When considering safe options, you assume everything will go according to plan. When considering risky options, you imagine all the ways things could go wrong. This creates an unfair comparison, where safe choices are evaluated optimistically, while risky choices are evaluated pessimistically. Understanding these biases allows you to recognize when your brain is providing bad risk assessment data. When you feel overwhelming anxiety about a decision, it's often your amygdala responding to imagined threats rather than your rational mind evaluating actual probabilities. Learning to distinguish between genuine danger signals and false alarms is a crucial skill for intelligent risk-taking. The concept of psychological safety also plays a crucial role in risk tolerance. When you feel secure in your fundamental needs, identity, relationships, and basic resources, you can afford to take risks in other areas. But when these foundational elements feel threatened, your brain goes into crisis mode and shuts down all non-essential risk-taking. This is why people often become more risk-averse during periods of personal instability, even when taking risks might help resolve their underlying problems. Your brain's temporal discounting mechanism also works against long-term risk-taking. Immediate costs feel more real and painful than future benefits, even when the future benefits significantly outweigh present costs. This is why it's easier to stay in an unsatisfying job than to endure the short-term uncertainty of career change, even when the long-term benefits are obvious. The good news is that these psychological tendencies aren't fixed. Neuroplasticity means your brain can literally rewire itself based on experience. Every time you take a risk and survive, regardless of the outcome, you strengthen neural pathways that support future risk-taking. Your amygdala learns to distinguish between real threats and false alarms. Your confidence grows as you accumulate evidence of your own resilience. Successful risk-takers develop what psychologists call risk intelligence, the ability to accurately assess and respond to uncertainty. They don't eliminate fear, they feel it fully while acting despite it. They understand that emotional responses provide data about their comfort zone, not objective information about external reality. They also reframe risk as asymmetric opportunity rather than symmetric danger. Instead of asking what could go wrong, they ask what could go right, and what's the worst that could reasonably happen. This shift in questioning activates different neural networks and generates more balanced assessments. The most sophisticated risk takers understand that risk isn't binary. It's a spectrum that can be managed through preparation, timing, and positioning. They take calculated risks by maximizing potential upside while minimizing potential downside. They understand that the goal isn't to eliminate uncertainty but to position themselves to benefit from it. By understanding how your brain processes risk, you can begin to override its outdated programming. You can feel the fear without being controlled by it. You can recognize bias without being blinded by it. You can honor your brain's protective instincts while still pursuing the opportunities that will transform your life. The key is working with your psychology rather than against it, using ancient survival instincts to fuel modern success. Chapter 3. Discomfort is the door. Why everything you want is just beyond the edge. Discomfort is not your enemy. It's your compass. While most people interpret discomfort as a warning sign telling them to retreat, successful risk-takers understand it as a navigation tool pointing toward opportunity. Everything you want in life exists just beyond the edge of your current comfort zone, and discomfort is the only reliable indicator that you're moving in the right direction. Your comfort zone is seductive because it requires minimal energy and generates no anxiety. Within its boundaries, you operate on autopilot, relying on established patterns and familiar responses. But this comfort comes at an enormous cost. Growth is impossible without discomfort, and staying comfortable guarantees stagnation. The very feelings that most people try to avoid are actually signals that you're approaching something valuable. Think about every significant achievement in your life, and you'll discover that each one required you to push through discomfort. Learning to walk involved countless falls. Developing relationships required vulnerable conversations. Building skills demanded frustrating practice sessions. Advancing your career meant taking on challenges that initially felt overwhelming. In every case, discomfort preceded growth, and growth preceded satisfaction. The relationship between discomfort and opportunity is so consistent that you can use it as a decision-making framework. When faced with multiple options, the one that generates the most anxiety, assuming it's ethical and aligned with your values, is usually the one with the highest potential for growth. This doesn't mean choosing the most reckless option, but rather recognizing that appropriate discomfort indicates you're stretching towards something meaningful. Professional risk-takers in various fields understand this principle intuitively. Athletes know that muscle growth occurs only when they push beyond their current capacity, creating the microscopic damage that rebuilds stronger. Entrepreneurs recognize that the ideas that make them most nervous often have the greatest potential impact. Artists understand that their most meaningful work emerges when they explore themes that feel personally vulnerable. The key insight is that discomfort has different flavors, and learning to distinguish between them is crucial for intelligent risk-taking. Destructive discomfort signals actual danger. Touching a hot stove, walking alone in a dangerous neighborhood, or engaging with toxic people. This discomfort should be heeded, because it's protecting you from genuine harm. But constructive discomfort signals growth opportunity. Speaking to a large audience, starting a difficult conversation, or taking on a challenging project. This discomfort feels threatening, but isn't actually dangerous. It's your brain's outdated alarm system, responding to unfamiliarity rather than genuine threat. Learning to recognize constructive discomfort and lean into it rather than away from it is perhaps the most important skill for personal development. Most people develop elaborate strategies to minimize discomfort, but this approach backfires because it also minimizes growth. They choose familiar restaurants to avoid the anxiety of trying new cuisines. They stick with established routines to avoid the uncertainty of experimentation. They maintain superficial relationships to avoid the vulnerability of deeper connection. Each choice feels rational in isolation, but collectively they create a progressively smaller world. Successful risk-takers flip this script by actively seeking appropriate discomfort. They view it as necessary fuel for growth rather than an obstacle to avoid. They understand that comfort and growth exist in inverse proportion. The more comfortable you are, the less you're growing, and vice versa. This doesn't mean pursuing discomfort for its own sake, but rather accepting it as the price of pursuing meaningful goals. The concept of optimal anxiety from psychology explains why moderate discomfort enhances performance. When you're too comfortable, you lack the motivation to excel. When you're too uncomfortable, anxiety overwhelms your capabilities. But when you're appropriately uncomfortable, stretched but not overwhelmed, you perform at your highest level. Elite performers in every field operate consistently in this zone of optimal anxiety. Discomfort also serves as an inoculation against future challenges. Each time you push through anxiety and achieve something meaningful, you build confidence in your ability to handle uncertainty. You develop what psychologists call self-efficacy, the belief that you can successfully navigate difficult situations. This belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that enables you to take progressively larger risks. The compound effect of embracing discomfort is remarkable. Each time you choose growth over comfort, you expand your comfort zone permanently. What once felt impossible becomes routine. What once generated crippling anxiety becomes manageable excitement. Your capacity for handling uncertainty grows, which means your capacity for pursuing opportunity grows as well. Practical strategies for embracing constructive discomfort begin with reframing your internal dialogue. Instead of thinking "this feels scary, so I should avoid it," try "this feels scary, so it's probably important." Instead of "I don't know if I can handle this," try "I don't know if I can handle this yet, but I can learn." These subtle shifts in language activate different neural networks and change your emotional response to uncertainty. Setting progressive challenges also helps build your discomfort tolerance gradually. You don't need to leap from complete comfort to overwhelming anxiety. Instead, identify small steps that feel slightly uncomfortable and work your way up. Each success builds confidence for the next level of challenge. This approach respects your psychological needs while still pushing you toward growth. Understanding the temporary nature of discomfort also helps. The anxiety you feel before giving a presentation is intense, but brief. The nervousness about starting a new job fades within days or weeks. The fear associated with moving to a new city dissipates as familiarity grows. Recognizing that discomfort is temporary, while growth is permanent, makes it easier to endure short-term pain for long-term gain. The physical sensations of constructive discomfort, increased heart rate, heightened awareness, energetic tension, can be reinterpreted as excitement rather than fear. The physiological experience is nearly identical, only your interpretation determines whether you feel energized or paralyzed. Champions in every field learn to welcome these sensations as signs that they're about to do something important. Discomfort also sharpens your focus and enhances your capabilities. When you're slightly anxious, your brain releases norepinephrine, which improves attention and processing speed. Your senses become more acute, and your thinking becomes more flexible. The stress response that feels uncomfortable is actually optimizing your performance for the challenge ahead. The most successful people don't eliminate discomfort. They befriend it. They understand that the feeling of being in over their head is actually the feeling of being exactly where they need to be. They recognize that everything worthwhile requires you to become someone new, and becoming someone new is inherently uncomfortable. Discomfort is not a barrier to overcome, but a pathway to follow. It's not evidence that you're going the wrong way, but confirmation that you're going the right way. When you learn to use discomfort as your compass rather than your enemy, you'll discover that everything you want really is just beyond the edge of where you currently stand. Chapter 4. From Reckless to Calculated. How the Bold Think Differently. The difference between intelligent risk-takers and reckless gamblers isn't their willingness to face uncertainty, it's how they think about and prepare for it. Reckless people take risks impulsively, driven by emotion and wishful thinking. Calculated risk-takers take risks strategically, driven by analysis and preparation. Understanding this distinction is crucial because it separates sustainable success from inevitable failure. Reckless risk-taking is characterized by poor information gathering, emotional decision-making, and inadequate preparation for potential outcomes. Reckless risk-takers act on hunches without research, ignore warning signs that contradict their desires, and fail to consider downside scenarios. They're driven by excitement, greed, or desperation rather than rational analysis. Their risks are often all-or-nothing propositions that could devastate them if they fail. Calculated risk-takers approach uncertainty differently. They gather relevant information before making decisions, consider multiple scenarios and their probabilities, and prepare contingency plans for various outcomes. They're driven by opportunity assessment rather than pure emotion. Their risks are structured to provide asymmetric payoffs, limited downside with significant upside potential. The first difference lies in information gathering. Reckless risk-takers often pride themselves on quick decision-making, but speed without information is simply impulsiveness. They make decisions based on incomplete data, often cherry-picking information that supports what they want to believe, while ignoring contradictory evidence. They mistake confidence for competence and action for progress. Calculated risk-takers understand that good decisions require good information. They invest time in research, seek diverse perspectives, and look for information that challenges their assumptions. They understand that the goal isn't to eliminate uncertainty, which is impossible, but to reduce it to manageable levels. They distinguish between knowable and unknowable factors, focusing their research energy where it can have the greatest impact. The second difference involves probability assessment. Reckless risk-takers tend to think in binary terms: either something will work or it won't. They focus on best-case scenarios while ignoring the likelihood of various outcomes. They often overestimate their chances of success because they want something to be true, rather than objectively evaluating its probability. Calculated risk-takers think probabilistically. They consider multiple potential outcomes and assess their relative likelihoods. They understand that most situations have ranges of possible results, rather than single predetermined outcomes. They focus on expected value, the probability of success multiplied by the magnitude of potential gain, minus the probability of failure, multiplied by the magnitude of potential loss. The third difference centers on downside protection. Reckless risk-takers often ignore potential downsides, assuming everything will work out as planned. When they do consider negative outcomes, they either dismiss them as unlikely, or assume they'll figure out solutions if problems arise. This approach leaves them vulnerable to catastrophic losses that could have been prevented or mitigated. Calculated risk takers obsess over downside protection. They ask, what's the worst that could reasonably happen, and how would I handle that scenario? They structure their risks to limit potential losses while preserving upside potential. They understand that protecting their downside is often more important than maximizing their upside, because staying in the game is prerequisite to eventually winning. Position sizing represents another crucial difference. Reckless risk takers often risk too much on single opportunities, sometimes betting everything on one outcome. They fail to consider how individual risks fit into their overall risk portfolio. A single failure can wipe out years of progress because they haven't diversified their risks appropriately. Calculated risk takers think about position sizing strategically. They never risk more than they can afford to lose on any single opportunity, regardless of how confident they feel. They understand that even high-probability opportunities sometimes fail, so they size their risks to survive multiple failures while still maintaining meaningful upside exposure. Timing also differentiates the two approaches. Reckless risk takers often feel urgency to act immediately, driven by fear of missing out or excitement about potential gains. They mistake motion for progress and confuse urgency with importance. This leads to poorly timed decisions that could have been much more successful with better preparation or different timing. Calculated risk takers understand that timing can be as important as the decision itself. They consider market conditions, personal readiness, and opportunity cycles when deciding not just what to do, but when to do it. They're willing to wait for better conditions or more preparation when the timing isn't optimal. Preparation methods also differ significantly. Reckless risk takers often jump into situations without adequate preparation, assuming they'll learn what they need to know along the way. While adaptability is valuable, lack of preparation often leads to avoidable mistakes that could have been prevented with advanced planning. Calculated risk takers prepare extensively before taking significant risks. They develop contingency plans for various scenarios, build the skills they'll need for success, and create support systems to help them navigate challenges. They understand that preparation doesn't guarantee success, but it significantly improves the probability of favorable outcomes. Feedback loops represent another key difference. Reckless risk takers often ignore feedback that contradicts their expectations, continuing to pursue failing strategies long after the evidence suggests they should pivot. They confuse persistence with stubbornness and mistake hope for strategy. Calculated risk takers create systems for receiving and responding to feedback quickly. They establish clear metrics for success and failure, monitor these metrics consistently, and adjust their approach based on results. They understand that changing course based on new information isn't failure, it's intelligence. The psychological differences are equally important. Reckless risk takers often use risk-taking to manage emotions, seeking excitement, avoiding boredom, or escaping problems. Their decision-making is driven by how they want to feel, rather than what they want to achieve. This emotional approach leads to inconsistent decision-making and poor long-term results. Calculated risk takers separate emotion from analysis. They acknowledge their feelings without being controlled by them. They make decisions based on objective criteria, rather than emotional impulses. They understand that good decision-making requires emotional awareness, but not emotional dominance. The transformation from reckless to calculated risk-taking requires developing new mental models and decision-making frameworks. It means learning to think probabilistically rather than deterministically, systematically rather than impulsively, and strategically rather than tactically. It requires the discipline to research thoroughly, the wisdom to wait for good opportunities, and the courage to act decisively when conditions are favorable. This evolution doesn't eliminate boldness, it channels it more effectively. Calculated risk-takers often take larger risks than reckless ones, because they've structured those risks to be survivable if they fail, and profitable if they succeed. They understand that true boldness lies not in ignoring risks, but in taking them intelligently. Chapter 5: Confidence Before Evidence. Trusting yourself when there's no guarantee. One of the most challenging aspects of intelligent risk-taking is developing the ability to act confidently before you have proof that your actions will succeed. Most people wait for evidence, guarantees, or permission before taking significant risks, but this approach ensures they'll never be first to any opportunity. True risk-takers develop what might seem like a paradox. the ability to make confident decisions based on incomplete information while remaining humble about their conclusions. This concept of confidence before evidence doesn't mean blind faith or wishful thinking. Instead, it represents a sophisticated approach to decision-making under uncertainty that combines rational analysis with emotional courage. It's the difference between needing certainty and tolerating uncertainty while still taking decisive action. Traditional thinking suggests that confidence should follow evidence. First, you prove something works, then you become confident about it. But this sequence creates a logical problem. How do you gather evidence about opportunities that require commitment before the evidence becomes available? You can't prove you'll succeed at entrepreneurship without starting a business. You can't demonstrate you'll excel in a new role without taking the job. You can't verify that a relationship will work without committing to it. The most successful people reverse this sequence when necessary. They develop confidence based on their ability to handle uncertainty, rather than their certainty about outcomes. They trust their capacity to learn, adapt, and persist, rather than their ability to predict the future. This shift in the foundation of confidence is subtle, but transformational. This doesn't mean acting randomly or ignoring available information. Intelligent risk-takers gather as much relevant data as possible within reasonable time constraints. They research market conditions, assess their capabilities, and consider potential obstacles. But they don't wait until they have perfect information, because perfect information never comes. They act when they have sufficient information to make a reasonable decision, even if that information is incomplete. The key is distinguishing between sufficient information and perfect information. Sufficient information provides a reasonable basis for decision-making and allows you to structure risks intelligently. Perfect information eliminates all uncertainty, but is never available for genuinely important decisions. Waiting for perfect information is actually a decision to let others make choices for you, or to miss opportunities entirely. Developing pre-evidence confidence requires cultivating self-efficacy, the belief in your ability to handle whatever challenges arise. This belief isn't based on having faced identical challenges before, but on having successfully navigated uncertainty in the past. Each time you take a risk and survive, regardless of the specific outcome, you build evidence of your general capability to handle the unknown. This meta-confidence becomes more valuable than situation-specific confidence. Instead of needing to know you'll succeed at a particular venture, you need to know you can learn what's required for success. Instead of requiring proof that a specific strategy will work, you need confidence in your ability to adjust strategies based on results. This shift from outcome confidence to process confidence enables action under uncertainty. The role of preparation in building pre-evidence confidence cannot be overstated. While you can't prepare for every possible scenario, you can prepare for general categories of challenges. You can build financial reserves to handle economic uncertainty. You can develop skills that transfer across situations. You can cultivate relationships that provide support during difficult transitions. This preparation doesn't guarantee success, but it provides a foundation for confidence in your ability to handle various outcomes. Mental rehearsal also plays a crucial role in developing confidence before evidence. Elite athletes visualize successful performance before competition. Successful entrepreneurs imagine navigating business challenges before starting companies. This mental practice doesn't create certainty, but it builds familiarity with uncertainty. It allows you to experience making decisions under pressure in a safe environment, building confidence in your ability to handle similar situations in reality. Understanding the difference between confidence and certainty is crucial. Certainty is about outcomes, knowing what will happen. Confidence is about capabilities, trusting your ability to handle what happens. Certainty paralyzes, because it's impossible to achieve. Confidence enables action because it's based on your track record of adaptation and learning, rather than your ability to predict the future. Successful risk-takers also understand that confidence is not a prerequisite for action. It's often a result of action. Taking the first step, even without complete confidence, often generates the momentum and information needed to take the second step with greater assurance. Action creates evidence, and evidence builds confidence. This creates a positive feedback loop where each step forward makes the next step easier. The concept of acting as if becomes valuable here. You act as if you're capable of handling the challenges ahead, not because you're certain you can, but because acting with confidence tends to produce better results than acting with hesitation. Confidence is partly performative. When you behave confidently, Others respond to you more positively, opportunities emerge more readily, and your own capabilities expand to match your behavior. This approach requires what psychologists call tolerance for ambiguity, the ability to function effectively in unclear situations. Most people find ambiguity uncomfortable and seek to resolve it quickly, often by avoiding uncertain situations entirely. Successful risk-takers develop comfort with ambiguity, recognizing it as the natural state of opportunity-rich environments. Building tolerance for ambiguity involves gradual exposure to uncertain situations and reflection on successful navigation of past uncertainties. It means recognizing that discomfort with ambiguity is normal and doesn't indicate actual danger. It involves developing what might be called uncertainty stamina, the ability to remain effective while operating in unclear conditions for extended periods. The social dimension of pre-evidence confidence is also important. When you act confidently without obvious justification, you often face skepticism or criticism from others. Well-meaning friends and family may question your judgment or try to protect you from potential disappointment. Developing confidence before evidence requires learning to trust your own assessment over others' opinions, especially when those others haven't taken similar risks themselves. This doesn't mean ignoring all advice or feedback, but it does mean weighing input based on the source's relevant experience and aligned interests. Someone who has never started a business may not be the best advisor about entrepreneurial risk. Someone who has never moved to a new city may not understand the challenges and opportunities of geographic risk-taking. Learning to filter advice based on relevance and experience helps maintain confidence when facing external skepticism. The timing aspect of pre-evidence confidence is critical. The earlier you act on an opportunity, the less evidence is available, but the greater the potential advantage. Early movers often capture disproportionate rewards precisely because they act before the evidence convinces everyone else to participate. But early action requires the highest levels of pre-evidence confidence, because you have the least external validation for your decisions. Developing this capability requires practice with progressively larger uncertainties. Start with small decisions where you act based on insufficient information and observe the results. Notice how often your ability to learn and adapt matters more than your initial accuracy. Build evidence of your capability to handle uncertainty, which then provides a foundation for confidence in larger uncertain situations. The ultimate goal is developing what might be called earned confidence. Confidence based not on guarantees about the future but on evidence about your past ability to handle uncertainty. This type of confidence is both more realistic and more powerful than outcome-based confidence, because it's grounded in actual capability rather than wishful thinking. When you trust yourself to handle whatever emerges, you can act boldly without being reckless. You can commit fully without being blind to risks. You can pursue opportunities that others miss because they're waiting for evidence that will never come. This is how breakthrough success happens, not through certainty but through confident action in the face of uncertainty. Chapter 6. Failing Forward. Why Risk-Takers are Masters of Recovery. The relationship between successful risk-takers and failure is fundamentally different from how most people experience setbacks. While the risk-averse see failure as something to avoid at all costs, and the reckless see it as an unfortunate possibility, intelligent risk-takers view failure as valuable information and an essential component of eventual success. They don't just accept failure, they actively extract maximum value from it and use it as fuel for their next attempt. This concept of failing forward represents a sophisticated approach to setbacks that transforms potential devastation into competitive advantage. It's not about celebrating failure or seeking it out, but about developing the systems and mindset to convert failures into assets. The most successful people in every field have failed more often than average people have even tried, but they've learned to fail faster, cheaper, and more instructively than their competition. The first principle of failing forward is speed of recognition. Mediocre performers often persist with failing strategies long after the evidence suggests they should pivot, while excellent performers quickly recognize when something isn't working and adjust accordingly. This isn't about giving up easily. It's about distinguishing between temporary setbacks that require persistence and fundamental problems that require strategy changes. Developing this recognition capability requires establishing clear metrics for success and failure before beginning any significant initiative. These metrics should be specific, measurable, and time-bound. Instead of vague goals like building a successful business, successful risk-takers set specific milestones like achieving $10,000 in monthly recurring revenue within 12 months. This clarity makes it possible to recognize failure early and respond appropriately. The second principle involves minimizing the cost of failure through intelligent experiment design, rather than betting everything on one large attempt. Sophisticated risk-takers structure their efforts as series of small experiments where each failure provides information at minimal cost. They test assumptions with prototypes before building products, validate market demand before scaling operations, and pilot new strategies before full implementation. This experimental approach requires what entrepreneurs call minimum viable products, or MVPs, the smallest version of an idea that can provide learning about its viability. The goal isn't to create something perfect, but to test fundamental assumptions with minimal investment. This allows for rapid iteration and course correction based on real-world feedback, rather than theoretical planning. The third principle of failing forward is systematic learning extraction. Most people experience failure as pure loss, wasted time, money, and energy, with nothing to show for it. Intelligent risk-takers treat every failure as expensive education, and ensure they extract maximum learning value from each setback. They conduct what the military calls after-action reviews to analyze what went wrong, what went right, and what could be done differently next time. This learning extraction process must be systematic rather than casual. It involves documenting specific decisions that led to failure, identifying environmental factors that contributed to the outcome, and recognizing personal behavior patterns that may have influenced results. The goal is developing reusable insights that improve future decision-making, rather than just processing emotional disappointment. Successful risk-takers also understand the difference between failure and feedback. Failure implies finality, something that didn't work, and never will. Feedback implies information data about what doesn't work under current conditions that might inform different approaches. This reframing transforms discouraging experiences into valuable intelligence about market conditions, timing, strategy, or execution. The emotional dimension of failing forward cannot be ignored. Failure often triggers shame, self-doubt, and fear of future attempts. These emotional responses are natural but counterproductive if they prevent learning or future risk-taking. Developing emotional resilience around failure requires understanding that setbacks reflect strategy errors rather than personal inadequacy. Building this resilience involves separating your identity from your outcomes. Your worth as a person isn't determined by whether individual risks succeed or fail. Your value lies in your willingness to attempt difficult things, learn from results, and persist through setbacks. This identity separation allows you to experience disappointment without being devastated by it. The concept of failing cheap is crucial for sustainable risk-taking. This means structuring attempts so that failures cost as little as possible while still providing meaningful learning. It involves testing critical assumptions before making major investments, piloting new approaches on small scales before full implementation, and maintaining multiple options rather than committing everything to single strategies. Failing cheap often requires counterintuitive approaches. Instead of trying to create the perfect solution immediately, you create imperfect solutions quickly to test fundamental viability. Instead of comprehensive planning, you engage in rapid experimentation. Instead of avoiding failure, you actively seek the fastest path to discovering what doesn't work so you can eliminate those approaches and focus on what might work. The network effects of intelligent failure are also valuable. When you fail forward publicly and transparently, you often attract other people who have faced similar challenges. These connections can provide advice, resources, and future opportunities that wouldn't have been available otherwise. Your willingness to discuss failures honestly signals to others that you're someone who learns and adapts rather than someone who hides or denies problems. Recovery speed represents another critical capability. The time between recognizing failure and launching the next attempt often determines long-term success more than the success rate of individual attempts. Fast recovery requires emotional processing skills, financial reserves, and systematic approaches to extracting learning from setbacks. This recovery capability improves with practice. Each failure you navigate successfully builds confidence in your ability to handle future setbacks. You develop what psychologists call self-efficacy around failure recovery, the belief that you can bounce back from disappointments and continue pursuing meaningful goals. The compound advantage of failing forward becomes apparent over time. While others are paralyzed by fear of failure or devastated by individual setbacks, you're accumulating valuable experience and building capabilities that improve your odds of future success. Each failure eliminates approaches that don't work and provides insights about approaches that might work. Understanding failure as information rather than judgment also changes your relationship with risk-taking itself. When failure becomes a source of valuable data rather than a source of shame, you can take risks more intelligently because you're not trying to avoid learning, you're trying to accelerate it. This shift in perspective often leads to taking better risks more frequently rather than avoiding risks entirely. The most sophisticated risk takers also understand that some failures contain the seeds of unexpected opportunities. What appears to be a setback in one context might reveal possibilities in another context. A failed product might identify an unmet market need. An unsuccessful job search might clarify career priorities. A disappointing relationship might teach important lessons about compatibility. This opportunity recognition requires what researchers call cognitive flexibility, the ability to see situations from multiple perspectives and identify possibilities that aren't immediately obvious. It involves asking what else could this mean, and how else could this be useful, rather than just focusing on initial disappointment. The timing of learning extraction is also important. Immediate post-failure analysis often occurs when emotions are intense and perspective is limited. More valuable insights often emerge after some time has passed and emotional intensity has decreased. Scheduling formal review sessions weeks or months after significant failures often yields more objective and useful conclusions. Building systems for failing forward requires both individual capabilities and environmental support. This might involve maintaining financial reserves that allow for multiple attempts, cultivating relationships with people who understand and support intelligent risk-taking, and creating personal practices that maintain emotional equilibrium during difficult periods. The ultimate goal of failing forward is developing what might be called failure immunity, not the inability to fail, but the ability to extract value from failure so consistently that setbacks become assets rather than liabilities. When you master this capability, failure loses its power to stop you and becomes instead a tool for accelerating your progress toward meaningful success. Chapter 7: Burn the Boats. The Power of Full Commitment. In 1519, Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés landed on the shores of Mexico with 600 men and a seemingly impossible mission: conquer the Aztec Empire. Facing overwhelming odds and knowing his men might lose courage, Cortés made a decision that would become legendary. He ordered his ships burned, eliminating any possibility of retreat. His message was clear: success was the only option, because failure meant death. This extreme act of commitment transformed a risky expedition into one of history's most successful conquests. The principle behind burning the boats extends far beyond military conquest. It represents the psychological and strategic power of eliminating alternatives to force breakthrough performance. When retreat becomes impossible, your mind stops wasting energy on escape routes and focuses entirely on success strategies. This total commitment often unlocks capabilities and creativity that remain dormant when comfortable alternatives exist. Most people maintain what they consider prudent backup plans, but these safety nets often become psychological crutches that prevent full engagement with challenging opportunities. When you know you can always return to your previous job, relationship, or lifestyle, part of your mental energy remains focused on that possibility, rather than committing fully to your new direction. This divided attention often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that ensures mediocre results. The power of full commitment lies in how it changes your brain's approach to problem solving. When alternatives exist, your mind naturally conserves energy by maintaining multiple options. When alternatives are eliminated, your brain shifts into what psychologists call implementation mode, a focus state where all cognitive resources concentrate on executing the chosen path. This mental shift often produces breakthrough insights and performance levels that wouldn't emerge with divided attention. However, burning the boats isn't about reckless abandon or eliminating all safety considerations. Intelligent commitment involves careful preparation, risk assessment, and strategic timing. Cortés didn't burn his ships immediately upon arrival. He first assessed the situation, gathered intelligence about local conditions, and secured initial advantages. Only then did he eliminate retreat options to maximize his force's commitment to success. Modern boat burning requires similar strategic thinking. Before eliminating alternatives, successful risk-takers ensure they have sufficient resources, skills, and information to give their chosen path a reasonable chance of success. They don't burn boats to create artificial pressure. They burn boats to focus all their capabilities on opportunities they've determined are worth pursuing completely. The timing of commitment is crucial. Burn boats too early, and you might commit to poorly conceived plans. Burn boats too late, and you might miss the window of opportunity that requires total focus. The optimal timing usually comes after sufficient research and preparation, but before perfect information is available. It's the moment when additional planning yields diminishing returns, and execution becomes more valuable than further preparation. Financial boat burning represents one of the most common applications of this principle. Entrepreneurs who quit their jobs to focus on startups often perform better than those who try to build businesses while maintaining employment safety nets. The financial pressure of lost income creates urgency and focus that part-time efforts rarely achieve. However, this financial commitment should be calculated, maintaining some runway through savings or reduced expenses rather than facing immediate destitution. Psychological boat burning can be equally powerful. Public announcements of goals or commitments create social pressure that helps maintain focus when motivation wanes. Publishing a book deadline, announcing a fitness goal, or declaring a career transition puts your reputation at stake and makes retreat emotionally costly. This social accountability often provides the extra push needed during difficult periods. Geographic boat burning involves relocating to environments that support your goals, while making old patterns difficult to maintain. Moving to a new city for career opportunities eliminates the comfort of familiar routines and social circles that might pull you back to previous behaviors. The disruption forces adaptation and often accelerates personal growth by removing environmental cues that trigger old patterns. Relationship boat burning might involve ending associations that undermine your growth or commitment to new directions. This doesn't mean burning bridges unnecessarily, but it does mean prioritizing relationships that support your evolution over those that keep you stuck in outdated patterns. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is create space for mutual growth. The concept of bridge burning differs from boat burning in important ways. Bridge burning eliminates connections permanently and often destructively. Boat burning eliminates alternatives temporarily and strategically. Good boat burning preserves relationships and possibilities, while removing immediate temptations to retreat from challenging but valuable commitments. Understanding the psychology of commitment helps explain why boat burning works. When alternatives exist, decision-making requires ongoing energy as you continuously evaluate whether to persist or switch strategies. This creates what psychologists call decision fatigue, the deteriorating quality of decisions after extended periods of choice-making. Eliminating alternatives reduces decision fatigue by removing the ongoing choice about whether to continue. Commitment also triggers what researchers call cognitive dissonance reduction. When you've made an irreversible commitment, your brain works to align your attitudes and efforts with that commitment to reduce psychological discomfort. This unconscious process often generates increased motivation, creative problem-solving, and persistence that wouldn't occur with reversible decisions. The sunk cost fallacy suggests that people often persist with failing strategies because they've already invested significant resources. However, intelligent boat burning differs from the sunk cost fallacy because it involves prospective commitment to carefully evaluated opportunities rather than reactive persistence with failing approaches. The key is burning boats for strategies you've determined are worth pursuing completely, not for strategies you're pursuing only because you've already started. Modern boat burning also requires understanding reversibility timelines. Some commitments can be reversed relatively easily within specific timeframes, while others become permanently irreversible. Intelligent risk-takers often choose commitments with medium-term irreversibility, difficult enough to ensure focus but not so permanent that they can't adjust course based on significant new information. The compound effects of full commitment often surprise people. When you commit completely to worthy goals, opportunities and resources often appear that weren't visible or available when you were hedging your commitment. People respond differently to someone who is fully committed versus someone who is trying something out. Fully committed people attract support, resources, and opportunities that fence-sitters miss. Building the capability for intelligent boat burning requires developing several underlying skills. First, you need accurate self-assessment to know when you're ready for full commitment. Second, you need strategic thinking to choose which boats to burn and when. Third, you need emotional regulation to handle the intensity that comes with eliminated alternatives. Fourth, you need execution skills to capitalize on the focus that commitment creates. The practice of boat burning also requires distinguishing between commitments worth making and commitments that would be merely dramatic. The goal isn't to create pressure for its own sake, but to eliminate distractions from pursuing genuinely important opportunities. Some situations benefit from maintained flexibility, while others require total focus. Developing judgment about when to commit fully versus when to maintain options is crucial for intelligent risk-taking. When done skillfully, burning the boats transforms potential into performance by eliminating the psychological comfort that enables mediocrity. It forces you to discover capabilities you didn't know you possessed, and to persist through challenges that would otherwise trigger retreat. The power of full commitment lies not in eliminating all risks but in focusing all resources on carefully chosen opportunities that justify total engagement. The ultimate lesson of boat burning is that extraordinary results often require extraordinary commitment. When you eliminate the option of giving up, you often discover that success was possible all along. You just needed to commit fully enough to unlock your complete capabilities and maintain effort through the inevitable difficulties that separate the committed from the merely interested. Chapter 8. Risk as Leverage: How the Brave Multiply Their Results. Most people think about risk as something that threatens their security, but sophisticated risk-takers understand risk as a form of leverage, a tool for multiplying their efforts and accelerating their progress toward meaningful goals. Just as financial leverage allows you to control larger assets with smaller amounts of capital, intelligent risk-taking allows you to achieve larger results with smaller amounts of direct effort. The key is understanding how to use risk strategically rather than randomly. Traditional approaches to success emphasize incremental progress, steady effort, and linear growth. Work hard, save money, follow conventional paths, and eventually achieve modest success. This approach works, but it's slow, predictable, and rarely leads to breakthrough results. Risk-takers achieve the same outcomes faster or achieve much larger outcomes in the same time frame by introducing leverage into their strategies. The concept of asymmetric risk lies at the heart of using risk as leverage. Asymmetric risks offer unlimited upside potential with limited downside exposure. Starting a business with savings you can afford to lose represents asymmetric risk. Your maximum loss is bounded, but your potential gain is theoretically unlimited. Conversely, symmetric risks offer proportional upsides and downsides, like gambling, where you can lose as much as you can win. Intelligent risk-takers actively seek asymmetric opportunities while avoiding symmetric ones. They look for situations where they can risk small amounts of money, time, or reputation for potentially large returns. They understand that even if most attempts fail, a few successes can more than compensate for all failures combined. This portfolio approach to risk-taking creates positive expected value over time. Time leverage represents one of the most powerful applications of strategic risk-taking. Instead of spending years climbing traditional career ladders, risk-takers often compress time frames by taking positions or starting ventures that could accelerate their progress dramatically. A successful startup might achieve in 2 years what traditional employment would take 20 years to accomplish. Even if the startup fails, the experience and connections gained often accelerate future opportunities. Network leverage emerges from taking social risks that most people avoid. Speaking at conferences, starting conversations with influential people, or sharing ideas publicly feels risky because it exposes you to potential rejection or criticism. However, these social risks often provide exponential returns in terms of relationships, opportunities, and reputation. One conversation with the right person can change your entire trajectory. The principle of calculated exposure helps optimize risk leverage. Instead of betting everything on single opportunities, sophisticated risk-takers expose themselves to multiple asymmetric risks simultaneously. They might start a side business while employed, write a book while working, or develop multiple income streams while maintaining their primary career. This approach increases their overall exposure to positive outcomes while limiting their exposure to any single failure. Skill leverage involves taking risks that build transferable capabilities. Learning to code by starting a software project, developing sales skills by launching a product, or building leadership abilities by starting an organization, all involve risks that pay dividends regardless of specific outcomes. Even if individual projects fail, the skills developed often become valuable assets for future opportunities. Financial leverage, when used intelligently, allows risk-takers to access opportunities that would otherwise be beyond their means. Real estate investors use mortgages to control properties worth more than their available cash. Entrepreneurs use investor funding to build companies larger than their personal resources would allow. The key is using leverage to amplify good opportunities rather than to take risks you couldn't otherwise afford. Information leverage comes from taking risks that provide valuable data about markets, opportunities, or personal capabilities. Small experiments and pilot projects often reveal insights that inform larger decisions. Someone considering a career change might take on consulting projects in their target field to gather information about market demand and personal fit. The risk of time investment provides leverage by informing much larger career decisions. Reputation leverage involves taking calculated risks with your personal brand to access larger opportunities, publishing controversial but well-reasoned opinions, taking public positions on important issues, or associating with promising but unproven ventures can enhance your reputation if you choose carefully. While reputation risks feel particularly scary, they often provide access to opportunities that wouldn't be available to people who never take stands. Geographic leverage uses location changes to access opportunities that aren't available in your current environment. Moving to cities with thriving industries, relocating to areas with lower costs and higher opportunity, or positioning yourself in emerging markets can provide dramatic advantages. The risk of geographic change often pays dividends in terms of career acceleration, network expansion, and access to opportunities. Technology leverage involves using new tools and platforms to amplify your efforts. Early adopters of new technologies often achieve results that would be impossible through traditional methods. Social media allowed individuals to build audiences that previously required mass media access. E-commerce platforms enabled single-person businesses to reach global markets. Identifying and adopting emerging technologies early provides leverage that diminishes as those technologies become mainstream. The compound effects of risk leverage become apparent over time. Each intelligent risk taken provides not just its direct benefits, but also information, skills, relationships, and reputation that inform and enable future risks. This creates a positive feedback loop, where successful risk-taking enables progressively larger and more sophisticated risks with greater potential returns. Understanding the difference between leverage and speculation is crucial. Leverage involves using borrowed resources or risk exposure to amplify the results of sound strategies. Speculation involves betting on uncertain outcomes without underlying strategy or preparation. Leverage multiplies the effects of good decision-making, while speculation simply increases exposure to random outcomes. Risk tolerance plays a crucial role in effective leverage usage. People with higher risk tolerance can use more aggressive leverage strategies because they can psychologically handle larger potential losses. However, risk tolerance without risk intelligence often leads to reckless behavior that destroys rather than creates wealth. The optimal approach combines appropriate risk tolerance with sophisticated risk assessment and management skills. Timing considerations become especially important when using risk as leverage. Leverage amplifies results in both directions. It can accelerate success but also accelerate failure. Using leverage during favorable conditions can provide dramatic advantages, while using leverage during unfavorable conditions can create dramatic losses. Successful risk-takers develop sensitivity to timing and adjust their leverage usage based on environmental conditions. The psychological aspects of risk leverage require careful management. Leverage creates both opportunity and pressure, and not everyone responds well to increased pressure. Some people perform better with higher stakes, while others become paralyzed by the increased consequences of failure. Understanding your psychological response to leverage helps determine appropriate levels for your personality and circumstances. Building systems for intelligent risk leverage requires developing several capabilities simultaneously. You need analytical skills to identify asymmetric opportunities, financial skills to manage exposure appropriately, emotional skills to handle increased uncertainty, and execution skills to capitalize on the opportunities that leverage provides access to. The ultimate goal of using risk as leverage is achieving meaningful results faster than would be possible through conventional approaches. This doesn't mean taking unnecessary risks or gambling with resources you can't afford to lose. Instead, it means strategically introducing calculated risks that multiply your efforts and accelerate your progress toward goals that matter to you. When used skillfully, risk becomes not just something to manage, but something to harness for achieving extraordinary results. Chapter 9. Courage over consensus. Why risk-takers don't wait for permission. The most transformative opportunities rarely come with collective approval or widespread support. By the time consensus forms around an idea or direction, the early advantages have usually been captured by those who acted without waiting for popular agreement. Successful risk-takers understand that breakthrough results often require moving against prevailing opinion, taking action before others recognize opportunities, and trusting their own judgment even when surrounded by skepticism. This doesn't mean being contrarian for its own sake or ignoring all feedback from others. Instead, it means developing the courage to act on well-reasoned convictions, even when those convictions aren't yet shared by your peers, family, or society. It means understanding that seeking permission or consensus often means missing the opportunities that could transform your life most dramatically. The psychology of consensus seeking is deeply ingrained in human nature. Our ancestors survived by maintaining group cohesion and avoiding actions that might lead to social exile. Being wrong alone was often fatal, while being wrong with the group was survivable. This evolutionary programming makes us naturally inclined to seek agreement before taking significant action, even when that agreement isn't necessary or helpful. Modern opportunities often reward the opposite behavior. Markets reward those who see value before others recognize it. Careers advance for those who develop skills before they become obviously important. Relationships flourish for those who commit before others prove their worthiness. In each case, waiting for consensus means arriving after the advantages have been claimed by earlier actors. The concept of social proof explains why consensus seeking can be counterproductive for risk-takers. Social proof suggests that people use others' behavior as a guide for appropriate action, especially in uncertain situations. While this heuristic works well for routine decisions, it fails catastrophically for exceptional opportunities, precisely because exceptional opportunities aren't yet socially validated. Consider the entrepreneurs who started internet companies in the early 1990s when most people viewed the internet as a curiosity rather than a commercial platform. Those who waited for consensus missed the opportunity to build foundational companies that captured enormous value. The same pattern repeats across industries and eras. The biggest opportunities emerge during periods of uncertainty when consensus hasn't yet formed. Professional risk-taking often requires moving without organizational permission or support. The employees who create the most value often do so by pursuing initiatives that weren't explicitly approved or by interpreting their responsibilities more broadly than their job descriptions suggest. They ask for forgiveness rather than permission because they understand that innovation rarely emerges from committee decisions or bureaucratic approval processes. This approach requires sophisticated judgment about when to seek input versus when to act independently. Some decisions genuinely benefit from collective wisdom and diverse perspectives. Others are best made quickly by individuals with direct knowledge and clear vision. Developing this judgment involves understanding the difference between decisions that improve with more input and decisions that deteriorate with more input. The timing aspect of acting without consensus is crucial. The optimal moment for risk-taking often occurs during periods of uncertainty, when others are paralyzed by lack of clarity. While everyone else is waiting for more information or broader agreement, successful risk-takers are positioning themselves to benefit from whatever emerges. They understand that certainty and consensus usually arrive simultaneously, by which time the opportunities have been claimed. Family and social pressures often represent the most challenging barriers to acting without consensus. Well-meaning parents, friends, and colleagues frequently discourage risk-taking out of genuine concern for your welfare. They may not understand that their safety advice actually increases your long-term risk by preventing you from developing capabilities and capturing opportunities that could provide real security. Learning to distinguish between advice worth considering and social pressure worth ignoring becomes essential. Advice from people who have successfully navigated similar risks deserves serious consideration. Concerns from people who have never taken comparable risks often reflect their own fears, rather than objective assessment of your situation. The source of input matters as much as the content of input. Building confidence in your own judgment requires accumulating evidence of your decision-making capabilities. Start with smaller decisions where you act against consensus and observe the results. Notice how often your independent thinking leads to better outcomes than following popular opinion would have produced. This evidence becomes the foundation for confidence in larger independent decisions. The concept of earned confidence applies particularly well to consensus-independent decision-making. You can't expect to feel comfortable making major decisions against popular opinion if you've never practiced making minor decisions independently. Build your confidence and capabilities gradually, by taking progressively larger risks without seeking widespread approval. Understanding the difference between input and permission is crucial for intelligent independent action. Seeking input means gathering information and perspectives to inform your decision-making. Seeking permission means abdicating decision-making authority to others. You can gather extensive input while maintaining final authority over your choices, but seeking permission transfers that authority to people who may not understand your situation or share your values. The role of mentors and advisors becomes particularly important when acting without consensus. While you shouldn't wait for popular approval, having access to experienced guides who understand your industry, personality, or goals can provide valuable perspective without requiring consensus. Choose advisors who have experience with the type of risks you're considering, rather than those who simply care about your welfare. Developing what might be called consensus independence doesn't mean ignoring all feedback or never changing your mind based on input from others. Instead, it means maintaining final decision-making authority while remaining open to information that might improve your choices. It means distinguishing between changing your mind based on better information and changing your mind based on social pressure. The compound advantages of consensus independence become apparent over time. Each decision you make independently builds confidence in your judgment and demonstrates to others that you're capable of independent thinking. This reputation often leads to opportunities that aren't offered to people who require consensus before acting. Leadership positions, entrepreneurial ventures, and creative projects often go to people who have demonstrated ability to act without waiting for permission. Social media and modern communication create new challenges for consensus independence. It's easier than ever to seek opinions from large numbers of people, but this accessibility can become paralyzing when dozens of people offer contradictory advice. The key is being selective about whose opinions you seek and setting boundaries around how much input you'll gather before making decisions. The emotional aspects of acting without consensus require careful management. It's natural to feel uncertain or anxious when taking action that others don't understand or support. These feelings don't necessarily indicate bad decisions. They often simply reflect the discomfort of independent action. Learning to distinguish between emotional discomfort and actual warning signals helps maintain effective decision-making under social pressure. Building systems for consensus-independent action involves creating personal processes for gathering relevant input without becoming paralyzed by excessive feedback. This might include identifying a small number of trusted advisors whose opinions you value, setting time limits for decision-making to prevent endless deliberation, and developing criteria for distinguishing between helpful input and unhelpful pressure. The ultimate goal of developing courage over consensus is creating the freedom to pursue opportunities that align with your values and goals, rather than opportunities that meet with social approval. This freedom often leads to more authentic and fulfilling life choices, because they emerge from your own assessment rather than others' expectations. When you can act without waiting for permission, you can pursue paths that others haven't yet recognized as valuable, often capturing rewards that wouldn't be available to those who wait for consensus to form. Chapter 10. The Risk-Taker's Reward: Freedom, Fulfillment, and the Legacy You Leave. The ultimate payoff of intelligent risk-taking extends far beyond financial returns or professional achievement. While these tangible rewards matter, the deepest benefits of embracing calculated risks lie in the freedom it creates, the fulfillment it provides, and the legacy it enables you to leave behind. Understanding these larger rewards helps sustain motivation through difficult periods and provides context for why risk-taking matters beyond immediate outcomes. Freedom represents perhaps the most profound reward of successful risk-taking. This freedom operates on multiple levels, each building upon the others to create a life of genuine autonomy and choice. Financial freedom emerges when intelligent risks generate resources that exceed basic needs, creating options that wouldn't exist otherwise. But financial freedom is just the beginning of what risks-taking can provide. Time freedom develops when risks-taking leads to career situations that align with your natural energy patterns and personal values. Instead of trading time for money in roles that drain your energy, successful risk-takers often create situations where their work energizes them because it reflects their authentic interests and capabilities. This alignment makes work feel less like obligation and more like express. Geographic freedom becomes possible when your income sources aren't tied to specific locations, or when your financial resources allow you to choose where to live, based on preferences rather than necessity. Risk-takers who build location-independent businesses or accumulate sufficient assets can design their environments to support their ideal lifestyle, rather than accepting whatever circumstances their local job market provides. Psychological freedom might be the most valuable form of liberation that risk-taking provides. When you've successfully navigated uncertainty multiple times, your relationship with future uncertainty changes fundamentally. Challenges that would paralyze others become manageable problems to solve. Setbacks that would devastate others become temporary obstacles to overcome. This psychological resilience creates freedom from the fears that constrain most people's choices. The fulfillment that comes from intelligent risk-taking differs qualitatively from the satisfaction available through safer paths. When you achieve something by overcoming genuine challenges and uncertainty, the sense of accomplishment is proportional to the difficulty involved. Easy achievements provide minimal satisfaction, while achievements that required growth, courage, and persistence create lasting fulfillment. This fulfillment also comes from alignment between your actions and your values. Risk-taking often involves pursuing opportunities that matter to you personally, rather than opportunities that others expect you to pursue. When your choices reflect your authentic priorities rather than social expectations, the resulting achievements feel more meaningful, because they represent who you truly are rather than who you think you should be. The process of risk-taking itself can be deeply fulfilling because it requires you to develop capabilities that remain dormant in safer situations. Courage, creativity, resilience, and adaptability all emerge more fully when you face genuine challenges. The person you become through intelligent risk-taking is often more interesting, capable, and authentic than the person you would have remained by playing it safe. Purpose and meaning emerge naturally from risk-taking, because it often involves creating value for others while pursuing your own goals. Entrepreneurs solve problems for customers. Artists share perspectives that others find meaningful. Leaders create opportunities for people who work with them. The process of taking risks to create value for others generates a sense of purpose that purely self-interested or completely safe activities rarely provide. The legacy aspect of risk-taking operates on several levels. The most obvious legacy is the tangible impact your risk-taking creates in the world. Businesses you start may continue serving customers long after you're gone. Ideas you develop may influence others for generations. Problems you solve may stay solved permanently. The compound effects of your risk-taking can extend far beyond your own lifetime. But legacy also includes the example you set for others through your willingness to take intelligent risks. Family members, friends, colleagues, and even strangers often draw inspiration from people who pursue meaningful goals despite uncertainty. Your risk-taking gives others permission to pursue their own dreams, and can create ripple effects that influence many more people than you'll ever know about directly. The personal legacy you create within yourself is equally important. The stories you'll tell about your life, the experiences you'll remember, and the sense of having lived fully all depend largely on your willingness to embrace appropriate risks. People rarely regret the risks they took that didn't work out, but they frequently regret the risks they didn't take when they had the opportunity. Contribution represents another dimension of the risk-taker's reward. When you develop capabilities through risk-taking, you become more able to contribute meaningfully to causes and communities that matter to you. The confidence, resources, skills, and networks that emerge from successful risk-taking enable you to support others in ways that wouldn't be possible from positions of safety and mediocrity. This contribution often becomes self-reinforcing. As you use your capabilities to help others, you develop deeper relationships, gain access to new opportunities, and find additional meaning in your work. The cycle of taking risks, developing capabilities, and using those capabilities to contribute creates a positive feedback loop that enhances all aspects of your life. The compound nature of risk-taking rewards becomes apparent over longer time periods. Early risks that seem modest in isolation often enable larger risks that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. Each success builds confidence, resources, and capabilities that support progressively more ambitious endeavors. The cumulative effect often exceeds what would have been possible through any single large risk. Understanding these larger rewards helps maintain perspective during difficult periods. When individual risks don't produce expected results, it's easy to question whether the entire approach makes sense. But when you understand that each risk contributes to larger patterns of growth, freedom, and fulfillment, temporary setbacks become more manageable because they're part of a larger journey rather than isolated events. The social dimensions of risk-taking rewards also matter. People who take intelligent risks often develop more interesting relationships because they're doing more interesting things. They attract others who share similar values around growth and contribution. They become magnets for opportunities because they're known as people who can handle challenges and create value in uncertain situations. Risk-taking also tends to accelerate personal development in ways that safer paths don't. When you regularly face challenges that stretch your capabilities, you develop faster and more completely than when you operate primarily within your comfort zone. This accelerated development often leads to insights, capabilities, and perspectives that enhance every other aspect of your life. The integration of risk-taking into a complete life philosophy often produces the deepest rewards. When risk-taking becomes not just something you do occasionally, but a fundamental approach to growth and contribution, it creates coherence between your values, actions, and results. This alignment produces a sense of authenticity and integrity that's difficult to achieve when your choices are primarily driven by security concerns. Building sustainable risk-taking practices requires balancing immediate desires with long-term vision. The most fulfilling risk-taking careers involve choosing opportunities that provide both short-term excitement and long-term meaning. This might mean turning down some immediately attractive opportunities in favor of those that contribute to your larger goals and desired legacy. The ultimate reward of intelligent risk-taking is the knowledge that you've lived according to your own judgment, rather than others' expectations, that you've contributed meaningfully to the world around you, and that you've developed your capabilities as fully as possible. When you look back on a life shaped by calculated risks taken in pursuit of meaningful goals, the sense of fulfillment tends to be profound, because you've actively created your circumstances rather than simply accepting whatever circumstances found you. This doesn't mean that risk-taking guarantees happiness or success in conventional terms, but it does mean that you've given yourself the best possible chance to create a life that reflects your authentic values and capabilities. Whether your specific risks succeed or fail, the person you become through the process of intelligent risk-taking is almost always someone you can respect and admire. The risk-taker's reward ultimately lies not in any specific outcome, but in the process of becoming someone capable of creating the life you want, rather than simply accepting the life that circumstances provide. This transformation from passive recipient to active creator is perhaps the greatest gift that intelligent risk-taking offers, and it's a gift that compounds in value throughout your entire life.